everyone. If you have questions about creative finance or want to learn more about rent to own, this is the live for you. We are going to be going live today with Jenn DelleFave. She's one of my favorite coaches and is one of the best teachers of creative finance and rent to own. She's going to be hopping on in just a second. I have been learning from Jenn for a while. She has an amazing coaching program. She has one-on-one. They have a whole community. If you're not part of their Facebook page, go check it out. It's called the Creative Finance Playbook. Here she is. I'm going to be adding her in now. I'm so excited.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome live from Instagram.
Woohoo. Thank you. So
Thank you.
excited to be here.
I'm so excited you're here too. I was just telling them you're one of the best coaches I've ever met and an expert at creative finance. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to just dive in and just pick your brain.
Oh, and that's what it's all about. It's just trying to like hear it over and over again until something sticks. And then as you're going through it, you can really put it into action and then having the right people to just ask the questions to. Because I was an English teacher. So like this whole world of numbers and finance and it can seem really overwhelming, but at the end of the day, you're just helping people. And yes, there's some math involved, but it's not too hard, I promise.
I love it. And you're just so down to earth and you're just always so open about sharing everything that you've learned along the way. And I feel like you've helped so many people through that. So I just want to say thank you for
Aw.
always being open to sharing. And I can definitely see like where your natural, teaching abilities come from with, history of being a teacher stuff definitely just shines right through you. So
Oh my gosh. Well, thanks, Miranda. And I gotta say, I gave you a shout out because you come with a positive attitude, you take the action, you put yourself out there, and you too are so authentic. I mean, my goodness, if you're not following Miranda in her taco and all the wonderful things that she's doing to help people out with their situations, you definitely got to be too, because, at the end of the day, like there's nobody to impress, right? Like we're here to maybe build some wealth for ourselves and our family, but then
yeah,
also, just serve other people because what you give, you get back. And I think I don't know, I really like to align myself with the people that feel that way too. So
yeah.
right back at you.
I love that saying too because I 100% agree with it. I mean, you really get back what you put out in the world. So you and
hmm
Joe have a lot coming to you because you're always putting stuff out there.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of people to help. And I think that's really what
Mhm.
turned me on to real estate. Because at first it wasn't the rundown junkers, right? Like these disgusting houses that I'm like, why are we going here back in 2008 when I met Joe? And I'm like walking in and walking right back out. But then I realized it was so much more. Like that was a part of the story.
Yeah.
And, if you can make the home beautiful again and then give somebody a new home to live in, like it just like gives you so much more purpose. And at the end of the day, that's really what keeps you going.
Yeah.
Like yes, you need money and it's great. It does so much for you, but you have to have a big purpose and a why for sure.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that caught my attention with rent to own too, especially with creative finance, is that you're able to go out, buy a house, and now give it to a family, or allow a family to be able to live in it and buy it eventually who wouldn't normally be able to buy a house.
hmm
And I just love that idea of being able to help families like that. So
Absolutely. And it's at first I'm like, well, who on earth would have a large non-refundable option deposit and not be able to just walk into a bank and get a loan? And
yeah.
once you start talking to people, like shocking, not shocking, you find out like there's a plethora of reasons, whether it's
Mhm.
a medical situation that happens. So now they're like behind on some payments or bills and their credit takes a dip, or a divorce happens. And that really can shake up somebody's credit. But people have money and people want to own a home. They just maybe need some time. And those are the folks that you're looking to help. You can't help everybody.
Mhm.
You'll get some people who are, mad that they can't afford the rent or they don't have the non-refundable option. But at the end of the day, you're just focusing on who can I help? And you just have to have that strict, like three questions that we ask every rent to own tenant buyer.
Yeah.
And if they meet that criteria, we get them into the house to show it.
Right. And so for people on here who aren't too familiar with rent to own, can you briefly explain a little bit about it and what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. So we call it rent to own because it's a lot easier to say and for people to understand. But when it comes down to it, all of our paperwork is actually going to be lease agreement with the option to buy. And so I just love starting out with the facts because you definitely want to have an attorney sit with your tenant buyer, with what we call them, at the paperwork so they can kind of see like what they're getting into, what they're signing up for, because it is different than just a straight long-term
Mhm.
rental. And if you've done any research, a lot of people do rent to own different ways. And I'm a strong believer there's a right way to do it, and then there's a bunch of wrong ways to do it. And for us, what we like to do is give people time to be able to purchase that home while they're renting it. And so a requirement just means that they're going to have a large non-refundable option that goes down up front,
Mhm.
and that option gets applied to the purchase price once they execute that option to buy.
Mhm.
So maybe today my tenant has bad credit, bunch of medical bills, all of this stuff happening, and they just need like a year or two to clean up everything. And once I get that report back, I can say, okay, because I do a background, I can kind of break all that down too. And so
Mhm.
they'll get that time to rent this property while they fix their credit. And but maybe they had 10,000, 20,000 to put down for their non-refundable option.
Mhm.
And then that gives them that option to buy at the purchase price. So you're just giving people time that, really they have the large non-refundable option up front. They can afford that monthly rent. And while they're renting, they take care of all your maintenance and repairs.
Mhm.
And if you've
That's
ever been
nice.
a landlord, those those repairs, it's not only the phone calls that are annoying, but it's the repairs and the maintenance eat into something called cash flow. And
Mhm.
if you're not cash flowing, then that's a
Mhm.
problem because you really should find a way to be able to cash flow on your long-term rentals. And then if and when the time comes, the tenant will purchase the property. And some do, some don't. Things happen, and you just, or at least giving them the option to
Mhm.
buy.
Oh my gosh, so much to unfold there. Okay, so I guess at first you said, okay, so I love that you said about a year, right? So do you have a minimum or maximum amount of time you put the lease for?
Yeah, so what I like to do is I like to set the lease for 1 year. So let's say we're renting at 16.95. They'll rent that property for 12-month lease at 16.95. That gives me the option that once the year comes to, like, did they stop paying? Do I need to evict? Like,
Mhm.
I have that option to like, okay, they have a non-valid lease, or I have the option to raise the rent a little bit. Maybe things are going up in price, the value's going up, and I
Mhm.
can increase rent a little bit. I never want to increase it too much because if they're a great tenant and they're paying on time, I don't want to like force them to try to like get the mortgage if they don't need to. And
Mhm.
especially right now with rates being what they are, nobody's like, trying to buy a house right now. All my rent to own tenants are like, we're good right now. We're just going to keep renting. And so you can set it. We've made the mistake of doing a longer lease. So that's why I always like to do 1 year and then you can renew it
Okay.
and figure that price out. And then the option agreement might be your second question. So I'll jump to that. The option agreement, we're also going to set that at like maybe 1 to 2 years. So what happens is they're going to move in and they're going to have that rent that they're going to pay, and then they're going to
Mhm.
have the purchase price of a house locked in. So if it's 2025 now, I got one moving in, I might say, okay, in 2027 you have until then to buy it at this price, and then in 2027 I can revisit that price as well, because if the market fluctuates and if it's appreciated, then me
Okay.
as the owner wants to be able to raise that a little bit as well, but
So
we still always give them a great price.
okay, so the length of time for your lease and the length of time for your non-refundable option deposit aren't necessarily going to be the same always.
It depends. I mean, if they're, I mean, I would say, yeah, like usually like a year or two is kind of where we're at.
Okay.
When we first got into it and we were just trying to figure it out, we made the mistake of doing like a 5 year term. And
Mhm.
that locked that price in. The guy ended up leaving the key on the gate and moved out randomly. So it all worked out. We got the house back. But note to self, like you definitely don't want to lock in a purchase price like too far down the road because
Right.
you don't exactly know where the market's going. So I always joke around, Joe has a crystal ball and he looks into it. It's like, okay, what should I price this property? What is it going to be worth in 2 years? Because it still has to appraise at that
Mhm.
price. So you can come down in your price. You can't go back up.
Right. And so when that lease is up at the year mark, say, do you ask for another non-refundable option deposit?
Nope, that's why I'm pretty strict on collecting as much as they possibly could put down up front because
Okay.
what we've learned is that either they have the money or they don't.
Mhm.
Sometimes you can get them to pay over monthly, but I really just want them to have that nice chunk
Mhm.
reserved. And like you as the investor get to spend that right away. And that's such a misconception. People always think like, oh, well, do I have to like keep that in a separate account and, show that when they go to actually buy the house? And the answer is no. You have to have proof of payment, so like a digital copy or a photocopy, whatever. Have that readily available, but you can keep that, set it aside, and then it'll just show up on the HUD statement when they go to purchase.
Okay, that makes sense. And have you had people like pay more throughout the year to go towards that purchase price?
Yes, we had one of my favorite deals that we've ever done was a terms deal. So that means that we bought it and we put $100 down to the seller. We then paid just closing costs. The seller actually had $60,000 of equity, and he was like, I don't need it. You guys just take over this payment. My Airbnb situation is just like failing, and I can't cover this mortgage payment anymore. So we bought it on a wrap mortgage, took over the seller's payments, and then I found a family who came in with $24,000 down for their non-refundable option. And then they were paying an extra thousand over rent, so we were cash flowing $1,300 a month on this property.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's incredible.
And it almost seems like, yeah, right, but it's so true. Now, the sad part about that story is that it's happy and sad. Happy that they became homeowners, sad because it was a 2.75% interest rate. So, oh man, but we made a big back end check. We made money up front. We made
Mhm.
cash flow in the middle, and then we made people homeowners.
Yeah,
And so we were able to then take the proceeds and buy more doors.
yeah,
So it's kind of like a Ferris wheel, I like to call it.
yeah. And so when you're going out and you're finding these properties, and I know it's nice because they're covering the maintenance and repairs and you're probably managing it yourself. So I guess how does that affect your numbers when you're analyzing? Are you still like mentally setting aside 10% for CapEx, maintenance and repairs, or are those numbers less when you're analyzing a deal?
I didn't even know what CapEx was when we first got started. And I remember back in 2020, we took it full time. By then, we had 10 rent to own properties. And I started coming into Instagram and meeting other
Mhm.
investors and this whole world of people who do this too, right? And I remember being like, what the heck is CapEx? And Joe's kind of laughing and he explained it. And he was like, we don't really worry about it because we collect the large non refundable
Mhm.
option and we're already cash flowing. That said, yes, you should have reserves. We always make sure that there is money set aside for if and when something happens, because as we
Mhm.
know, people are people. So, in a perfect world, I would tell you I have no evictions and nothing bad ever happens. But, like you mentioned in the beginning, I'm down to earth and I'm real. And yeah, like evictions happen, people stop paying, you have to go through the motions. And, the best part is if I do have to fork out money for a property that maybe a tenant left in less than desirable conditions, I know that once I fix it up, I'm going to get somebody with another $10,000, $20,000 non-refundable that's going to help offset that cost.
Mhm.
But yes, you always need to have money in your account. So you can't operate as an investor with zero money forever. You can get into real estate for zero money down, do some wholesale deals, and we could talk about that too. But, at the end of the day, you definitely need to have some money set aside for the just in case. And I also say, like, when you're looking for your first rent to own buyer, you need to have about 3 to 5 months saved for floating that mortgage
Mhm.
payment or whatever loan payment you bought the property for. It might take you a little bit of time to find the right tenant buyer because you're looking for somebody with money that has, the ability to afford the rent and then
Mhm.
also checks all the boxes that you're looking for.
Okay, that makes sense. And so I guess when like say you're in this lease and then something happens, like maybe like the AC goes out and the entire thing needs to be replaced and now that person they can't afford it. How would you kind of handle that situation?
That's a great question. Um, and so we try to mitigate that very thing in the very beginning by letting them know, like, hey, after the first 30 days, you are responsible for all maintenance repairs. So if something does go, like the AC or the hot water tank and whatnot, then technically it is on them. And for the most part, we try to qualify people that have, jobs that can afford the rent
Mhm.
and that they understand this process and that they're going to be taking care of that. But that said, at the end of the day, it's still your home. You own it. these people are just renting it. And so if somebody comes to us and says like, "Oh my gosh, the hot water tank just went, it's Christmas, we don't have the extra funds, we're getting quoted these crazy amounts."
Mhm.
Joan and I have been known to go in and put in the hot water tank for 975 around Christmas time because these people are paying rent, they are paying over. So it's kind of, it's at your discretion, it's your business. And I feel like what you give, you get back, and you want your property to be taken care of. So most of the homes we are buying are turnkey, beautiful homes that are in great condition, but
Mhm.
anyone who owns a home knows something will go at some
Yeah.
point. So and then there are times where they just reach out. The tenant will be like, "Hey, do you have a recommendation, someone
Mhm.
that you know, like, and trust?" And then they will take care of it. But, if they need assistance for some reason like that, it's your
Mhm.
business. So you make the judgment call, and we've definitely put a little money like that. And then they were so grateful, and they've never been late on rent again, and they're still renting it. And these people moved in. It's an actual story I'm telling you. So they moved in like 2019,
Wow.
and they're still just renting away.
That's incredible. So,
Yeah.
okay, what if that happened like a disaster happens and the roof gets damaged?
Ooh.
And that's an insurance claim. I mean, it because you still have regular insurance like you normally would on a rental, right? So
So you want to
who
make
puts that
sure,
claim in?
yep, wherever the deed, whoever has title owns the house, the property, which we love to put land trusts. All of our houses are in land trusts. Then the insurance is going to be covering that home. So while we'll encourage and we, pretty much demand like, hey, get renter's insurance. It's so
Mhm.
cheap. Like you silly not to. But if the roof gets damaged, it would be on us unless it is like an HOA condo situation, then you have to figure out like whose insurance that is.
Mhm.
But for the most part, yeah, like you would go through. We've had fire, and so the fire, took out the kitchen and then the smoke damage. So our insurance went through all the claims, all of that. But at the end of the day, the interesting thing on that fire that happened was our insurance went after the renter's insurance because it was their stove.
Oh.
So that's why we're always big proponents of don't give appliances in your rental, like sell them to them even for $1. But like you should not be applying or supplying appliances to your rentals. Just food for thought.
Oh, that is a great tip. Wow. I didn't think about it. Yeah, you sell it for $1. So would you just have to like create like a small separate like agreement on the side saying you sold your appliances for like $10 when you do the deal? Just
Yeah,
like
it would just feel like when they're moving in, they sit down the attorneys and they're filling out they're
okay.
signing their lease and their option. It'll just say like, appliances sold as is,
Mhm.
yada yada. So
Okay. And the rental lease and the rent to own option with the non-refundable option policy, these are two different contracts, right? Okay.
yes. Yep.
All being
Really, really, that's where like people they get in trouble, to be honest, So if they don't have the right paperwork to uphold in court,
mhm,
then the court could say they have equity in the house, that your
mhm,
seller financing it, maybe they have too much money into it. So if you have very strict paperwork that says this is their rent, this is their lease agreement, and then this is the option to buy, and it'll say in there exactly how long they have and all of that.
mhm,
And our lease agreement is, very special too because it says after 30 days that they're responsible for all maintenance and repairs. So it's just
mhm.
everything, comes down to what it says in the documents. So make sure that you have all your proper paperwork. And we
Okay.
don't just close at Starbucks. Like we send them to an attorney. Even here in Florida, we've got a great guy. He'll do it virtually,
Mhm.
and he just sets up like this with the tenant and he walks through. And we have the tenant pay for that too. So they're paying the fee to sit down and be walked through, making sure they understand line by line the agreement they're signing.
Okay. And do you ever offer them like an option to buy like a home warranty for you guys? Because I mean, they can't get one, but you technically could as an investor, right? For like your investment property, you can get a home warranty and have them possibly pay for it. I don't know if that's an option or not.
I don't know. I don't really know what a home warranty would be in this case.
It like so it covers all like big major things like if the AC goes out, the water heater goes out, any major things that happen within a year, the home warranty will cover it.
Hmm.
So, like when I bought like first two houses, I got a home warranty for a year. It came in handy sometimes, sometimes it didn't. But like I say, a dishwasher breaks and on the inspection it was fine. Now
Okay.
rather than your renter having to come out of pocket for a whole new dishwasher, a whole new water heater or AC or something, the home warranty will come out and cover it for like a $75 fee.
Yeah, I've never ever done anything like that. So I'd have to check with Joe. I'm not sure. Every time we buy a property, we're always going direct to seller and
Okay.
just taking over mortgage payments. So there's no third party or anything coming in for a home warranty. So I'm not sure how
Okay.
that would work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'm asking because have you also ever had a rent to own tenant who was an investor? Because I just talked to an investor who did this. They did a rent to own, but so they were the technically like they would be your renter, but she would then sublease it to two other renters. So she was able to still cash flow, but under a rent to own contract. Have you ever seen that?
So there's basically what I guess the fancy term is like arbitrage.
Mm-hmm.
And typically what we're looking for are homeowners. But it was kind of funny in 2020, 2021, we bought a property. We found a rent-to-own tenant buyer, thought they moved in as a family, and then I saw that property floating around on Airbnb. And so what they had actually done is turned that rent-to-own into an Airbnb, and we're profiting that way. And at first, like that is not part of our lease. You're not allowed to do that. But we saw that the house was being taken care of. They were paying the rent on
Mm-hmm.
time, like definitely put a large chunk down. And so we
Mm-hmm.
were like, you know what? If it's working, then we're just gonna let it keep working. And then the funny part was then that tenant buyer then referred the property I was telling you about with like the crazy cash flow and that seller that had a failed Airbnb. So we bought that property. And then the two of them actually joined our coaching program to learn more
Mm-hmm.
about how they could buy
Right.
property. So it was like a full circle moment.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm so glad I wasn't like, you're not supposed to be, Airbnb my property. But it's just
Yeah.
one of those things where, again, you step back, you take
Mm-hmm.
make an educated decision of like, okay, do I want to make a big stink about this? If it was like getting destroyed and the cops were getting called and I'm getting violations from the town, then now we got a problem. But if
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting rent every month and everything's taken care of and the property is like looks pristine,
Mm-hmm.
like it's what it is. Go make your money, like as long as I'm getting paid.
So you don't automatically put like a subleasing portion into your contract. You just kind of like wait for them to either approach you or request it.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah,
that
that's how I
makes sense.
would do it. And that's literally the only one that I know of. For the most part, I believe everyone else is truly a family. Like they're looking to either keep their kids in the school district
Hmm.
or they just don't want to have to like move again and again and again
Yeah,
because we know how, landlords will just randomly have to sell sometimes.
right.
So they're really looking for that.
Time. Because I know, and I'm glad you brought that up because there are so many different reasons. But one reason you mentioned earlier too was they need to repair their credit. And I know that makes a lot of people nervous getting a renter in there who might not have very good credit. So I guess under that type of situation where they need that credit repair, do you have them go through like a credit repair program or do you need to show proof that they're in the process of like, repairing it? Like how do you kind of monitor
Yeah.
that?
I know it's kind of backwards. So we were just having this conversation with one of our buddies here in Tampa. He's thinking of doing rent to own. And, he's like, yeah, but like, what if they have bad credit? And we're like, well, you gotta, it's a picture, right? And that's where Joe does have a little bit more of a credit financial background. He was looking at people's credit for his job in the car dealership. And it kind of gave him a leg up. But if you don't have that, then screenthetenant.com is who we use. And they are incredible. Paul and Diane Ritter, that's where you will have your client submit all of their information. And Paul and Diane then do offer a credit repair service. So if their credit is really bad and you feel uneasy about it, you can require them to enroll, and then they stay in touch with you. Paul and Diane are like, hey, they stopped paying, or this happened, or they did enroll, and they really keep tabs. And their goal is to really help that person improve their credit. Now, you have to look, like I said, look at the big picture. Is
Mhm.
it that this person is making a bunch of late payments all across all their credit cards and they're not making their car payments on time? Or was it truly like, I just went through this situation and this is why this happened and this is my game plan for the next however long? And
Mhm.
the firsthand experiences are the lady last year moved in with the bad divorce. So she gave us $31,000 to move into this house. Some of it was
Oh
her
my goodness.
non-refundable option, and some was like her first 6 months of rent. And her credit was, I don't know if it was like 500, 400. It was low. And so somebody that's just offering a rental wouldn't even like give her the time of day. But
Mhm.
because we saw that she's got a great paying job, it was the divorce that just happened. She sold her house that she was living in, and now she's got some funds.
Mhm.
And so her story is telling us she just needs a little time to, get back on her feet.
Right.
And she's sending us drawings of the backyard of where she's going to plant all of the gardens and her vegetables and all of that. So it's like when you can really step back and take a full view picture of that versus just like what Joe would call like a credit criminal who's just never paying anything on time, right? And they're just like a little bit of a hot mess. And maybe they don't have a decent income, they can't afford the rent, and then also they just got like a settlement or something, and so they have a lot of money but like nothing else adds up, then that would be a red flag. So you don't want to just take someone because they have $20,000. Sounds great, right? Ooh, 20 grand.
Right.
But like you got to look, can this person afford my rent for the next year? Can they then afford a mortgage? Because it'll give you a snapshot from Paul and Diane at screenthetenant.com. They'll
Mm-hmm.
give you like a kind of look forward to if they were to purchase this house at this percentage, this is what their payment will be. And it's good for them to see that too, because it's usually, especially right now with these rates, it's not too far off from what the rent is. So, it just kind of gives them that incentive of like, okay, I got to get my stuff fixed so eventually I can buy, and this is what I got to
Mm-hmm.
do.
Do you guys ever work closely with lenders to like help like connect them with these rent to own buyers?
We've had a couple people, but I haven't really, nobody's just kind of spoon feeding me the buyers. It's a very organic,
Hmm.
methodical, like
Yeah.
posting. Just like we talk to our sellers, it's like there's a mass marketing of trying to
Hmm.
find the right person. But as far as helping the person get qualified, yes, we've got a creative lender, I like to call him. His name is Joseph Meyer out of New York, and um, he works in a couple different states as well. But the problem we were running into when we first were trying to get these people qualified to get their mortgage is like a traditional bank that was very black and white was, almost not understanding what we were trying to say. So we had to call around and did some research. So once we found a guy like Joseph Meyer, he was able to be like, oh, yeah, we just need this, this, this. And he made it so easy because it was a bit painful the first time I did it with a Rocket Mortgage, I think it was. And I was just like jumping through so many hoops trying to like, I'm like, they paid on time, they've done all this. Whereas Joe makes it like so easy, which as an investor, you are so appreciative
Yeah.
of.
Okay, that's incredible. I love that you have that kind of referral that you can give, the tenants once they are ready to buy. So it's not like they're having to go through that whole stressful process either, which is nice. You're kind of like streamlining it for them.
Yeah, and I tell them like you can go do it yourself, but like Joe makes it so easy.
Yeah.
I have to give him like proof of all of this, and then you've got to provide him that, and he'll
Mhm.
meet with them too, and even give them like you still gotta like get this car off your credit, or you need to make these payments on
Yeah.
time. So it's like I have Paul and Diane who can help. So again, you're creating a team. You've got your lender that can be there looking. You've got Paul and Diane who are in the background helping as well. So
Mhm.
there's so many different parts to it. You, as the investor, don't have to know every single thing. It's the who, not how.
Yes. Absolutely. And you know what question I get a lot from investors when I'm telling them about rent to own is that who would pay this rent to own option and then leave? Like what makes you think they're not gonna buy the house? And I'm like, we need to talk to Jen. She's got some stories.
I do. And I mean, I don't know what else to say other than people are people
Mhm.
and life happens. And so I've had one gentleman, I think it was 2022, we're driving down to Florida for our 1 month stay in March of 2022, which turned into us moving down here. And Phil lived in Rochester in a nice little house that we had, and he had given $10,000 for his non-refundable option, lived with his family like right before COVID hit. So it was 2020. So he lived there for like 2 years. And all of a sudden I get this message saying, hey, just so you know, I'm getting a job transfer to Phoenix. We're going to be out by the end of the month. Thanks so much for everything. Sorry, we couldn't buy it, or something along those lines. And I was like, okay. And because he paid on time and he was so great, I gave him $1,000 of it back. Now, as the paperwork says, it's non-refundable, but I at least was like, hey, like for your moving expense, at least take 1,000. Thank you so much. And then I've had last year the weird one was a guy who left the key on the gate, and I didn't even know he left. And so his option was going to be expiring. It was a 5-year one. He just kind of stopped communicating. And then I just get an email one day saying the key, or he didn't even say, he was just like, just so you know, I'm out of the house and not living there anymore. I was like,
Oh.
okay, thanks, Matt. How do I get in the house? And he said, oh, the key's on the gate. And I was like, okay. And we get in there, the contractor goes in. and the house was a bit of a mess. And he had been growing marijuana, and there were like plants everywhere. And basically, I think he was, obviously just having his own things going on
Mhm.
and knew that he wasn't gonna buy the house. I don't know if he didn't have he never got a W-2. He was maybe self-employed. I'm not really sure what was going on, but got the house back. So we did have to put some money into that one, which I wasn't upset about because then the lady with the garden out back with the $31,000 moves in. So
Yes.
it's just strange how some people just leave. Another guy found love on the other side of town. And so he was like, yeah, my girlfriend doesn't want to live over on this side, so we're gonna live over there. Sorry, I couldn't buy the house again. So like the people almost feel bad that they couldn't fulfill their end of the bargain of like buying this house.
Mhm.
But again, we're just like, okay, but I don't feel bad about keeping the non-refundable because if you get a house back after 2, 3, 4, 5 years and people with dogs, kids, stuff
Mhm.
living there, like there's some work that usually needs to get done. So
Yeah.
you can then fix that property up and get it ready for the next person.
Okay. And so when, because as I'm analyzing properties, it really seems like in order to get a rent to own property under your belt, you really do need to buy it creatively with interest rates as high as they are, unless you're, buying cash or able to get, a decent deal. So I guess how are you finding these properties, and then also how are you structuring them without having to go to the bank?
Yeah, well, I would first look at if you have a portfolio, take a look. Is there like a problem property that you have that you're kind of like, ooh, man, this one just always causing me trouble. I'm getting calls all the time. Like, can you offer that as a rent to own? If it needs a little bit of work, could you offer a handyman special? Because our first five properties we bought traditionally with the banks, we bird all the stuff, and then we still turn those into rent to own. So I'd first at least look at your own properties because the beautiful thing is you could get that large non-refundable option, some capital back into your bank account
Mhm.
that you can now spend to buy your next property. And so if you're in that situation, you're looking to purchase a property without having to go to the banks, you need to find people that have houses. And we all know that you need leads and you need to be able to talk to people. And there's a million ways to get them. Our favorite is Facebook. We find it super simple. You just go into Facebook, you create your profile page, you let everybody know who you are and what you do,
Mhm.
that you buy houses, if you have a referral and you purchase, you'll give them some money. You tell that story on your socials. You go into Facebook groups and you post our infamous blue ad here. Does anyone have a house for sale not market ready? Right. So if
Mhm.
you need those, if you need that, like just let me know, DM me. I can certainly set you up with the exact wording that we use. And then we have a script that we ask 10 questions to our sellers. And it's about the 100 person mark. There's about 100 people you should be talking to get a yes to a creative deal that makes sense, that cash
Mhm.
flows. Um, a lot of people purchased with the interest rates being 3, 4, 5 is kind of the cutoff, I would say. Once it hits that 5% and up, I'm finding it hard to cash flow.
Mhm.
But don't sleep on free and clear properties. So if you can get a hold of people who own properties free and clear, that's where the sky is the limit. And you negotiate the terms. You create the win-win situation. And that's how we did our very first deal back in 2017.
Mhm. I love that. I mean, because I know some people are, a bit skeptical to, do the Subto, so they do prefer seller financing. Do you guys have kind of like a mixture in your portfolio of doing a subject to, or maybe like a hybrid with seller financing and Subto?
So we've never done a hybrid.
Okay.
I always I wonder how that works because the numbers really have to make sense. I see a lot of deals floating around on Facebook, and I'm like, I don't know how that makes any sense unless you're doing like a pad split, co-living situation, which we don't. And so I'd say the majority is definitely taking over sellers' mortgage payments, like you're saying, like they're subject to the existing loans. And then I have a handful of seller finance. So when they
Okay.
come, they are usually ones that are not going to get assigned to anybody else because you're negotiating those terms, and that's like between you and the seller, and you're probably going to want to keep that one.
Yeah. And then, so when you're approaching, the seller, how are you kind of structuring it to protect you and them?
With seller finance or
Yes, seller
subject to.
finance.
So, seller finance again, well, either one, you're just asking a bunch of
Mhm.
questions. And so if it's a savvy investor who wants, 25% down and all the interest in the world, and then it's not making any sense for you as also an investor, then it's probably not a deal. And that's okay. Just walk away. Follow up in 30 days. It's got to be a motivated seller. So when I'm structuring any deal, it just has to come down to the least amount that I have to put down. So 2017, we did a yellow mailer campaign, and we had one guy, one deal out of the whole thing, $5,000, one deal, which worked out great. But he had a free and clear house. It was upstate New York, so the prices are obviously way nicer, we'll call it. And so he wanted $80,000, which was a fair price for his home, and we negotiated $500 a month payments to him because it was free and clear. We still had to get the taxes covered, the insurance, make sure that was on the property. And in our agreement with him, we cover all maintenance and
Mhm.
repairs. But then with our agreement with our rent to own, it says they cover all maintenance and repairs. So it's kind of how we protect ourselves as far as
Mhm.
being able to actually cash flow on that. And then we set a term length, I forget, a couple years it was. And then our tenants moved in, $10,000 non-refundable, bought it. A couple years later, I think it was 131. So we purchased it for 80, paid down principal only $500 every month, and then and we sold it for 131. So 80 to 131
Mhm.
plus cash flowing in the middle plus a non-refundable option. So yeah, all that.
That's incredible. So when you get that non-refundable option deposit, I'm curious, do you guys just reinvest it right away? Do you put it into a high yield savings account? Like, what are you doing with this option deposit?
When we first got started with learning how to do this, we had the five properties in 2017. And so that money was starting to be spent on honestly mentoring. That we were paying for coaching how to do this. We were starting to learn to set up systems, which I didn't even know what that meant. And so we're realizing that it was going to cost a little bit of money to start running a real estate investing business. So we would just use that money for the business. Now you could take it and spend it on anything that you wanted, but at the time Joe had his W-2 job, so that was always just like our personal money, and anything that was coming from the real estate, we always just kind of kept that in the real estate bank accounts and used that to start funding um, I guess marketing, and then also if we needed to pay for closing costs. So we buy seller to Steve's deal, had to pay for the closing costs, get the $10,000 non-refundable, and then seller Linda comes along, and she also has a mortgage on her property, so we have to take over her mortgage payments. So now I'm using some of that money to cover her mortgage payments, and we kind of it just like funnels through your business that way in the very beginning. I wish I had profit first back then. So I would definitely say make sure you're profit firsting. David Richter wrote the book Profit First for Real Estate Investors. And so once I got my hands on that, we really took that seriously and like would take a percentage and put that in your taxes. So when tax time comes, you're not like, oh my gosh, I owe all this money, right? Like, no, you know you're going to owe the money, put it in an account, pretend it's not there, pay yourself first, the whole notion behind profit first. So we should have been doing that back then. So I would say if I could go back, I would have started that way sooner. But anything we were making, we were just putting right back into the business.
Okay. I always love to see like how people are kind of like, using their, the income that they're getting and, making it as efficient as possible. So I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I profit first. I feel like I've seen it. I don't think I've read it all the way through, but I think I can't remember. I remember seeing I watched a video about the author talking about it, and it was very, very helpful. Like because he had like what 6 or 7 different accounts he was saying to open, right? I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to
And
do
it
this.
it sounded, I was like, you're crazy. That's not ever happening. And then as we started scaling, I was like, oh my gosh, like we need to get our hands on like this quickly. And so I even went a step further, and he's got a company, Simple CFO. And I hired them, I think it was almost a year and a half ago or so, 2 years ago. So I have a fractional CFO who comes in and helps me manage all of our companies and just like, really works hand in hand with me and my executive assistant to help us just make sure all of the bank accounts, all the different buckets. And that's what it comes down to. And it's a total pain in the neck when you're opening up your accounts. Like I get it. And there's actually probably easier ways to do it than I did because I'm old school and I would like go in the bank and try to open them all up. But you can just have like online bank accounts. And
Mhm.
there's all these different ones you can do nowadays. But if you have one property or you have 30, you should be implementing profit first because success is a good night's sleep. And I could not believe the horror stories that I hear with people not paying their taxes. And I'm like, to me, that's just like, that's a non-negotiable. Like, just like I
Right.
need to eat food every day, like I'm paying my taxes. But again, people are people. So I'm
Yep.
not here to judge, but Profit first, real estate investors, David Richter, shout out. He's the man. Definitely go get his book at the very least and
Yes.
implement it.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
Well, I know you've already talked about some of the, real properties that you have, but did you want to do a deep dive into one of your favorite properties that you were able to get with either seller financing or Subto?
Yeah, I mean, I talked about the first couple that we did, Seller Steve, and then I guess we could talk about the most recent ones we've done. I did one last year. And it was kind of funny because it's a New York property. The sellers reached out. They just bought it not that long ago. So they didn't have really any equity. And that's like one key thing I would encourage anyone watching or listening,
Hmm.
don't throw away the properties that have no equity because a lot of investors, they're thinking cash, purchase price. I need a lot of equity. But in these, like I prefer them not to have a bunch of equity because that means that they just moved in. Now, the problem with that, if it's in the last like year or so, the interest rates might prevent you from cash flowing.
Hmm.
But this one actually cash flows. It's up in East Chatham, New York. Sellers were excited to move to this property, and then they realized they wanted to move to Florida. I was like, well, totally get that because we did the same thing. And so they were like, just take over the payments. Yeah, we don't want to worry about listing it because we're packing our bags, we're moving regardless. And so Deb and her husband were able to just move down to Florida and know that we were going to take it over. Now, we thought about assigning this property because we kind of thought it was like the perfect short-term rental. Again, we don't do STRs, so little did we know there was a train kind of nearby and everyone poo-pooed it. They were like, "No, it's not a good property." So, we get this little bug in us because we're like, "Well, we got to help the seller." And we're like, "Well, let's just put it out there." And we didn't even close on the property yet. And we had found a rent-to-own buyer. A family reached out. I don't know if we showed it like a handful of times. And by showing it, I have a girl in Texas who hops on her phone and does like a virtual walkthrough with the people at the house. So that's how we handle all virtual showings. And they just fell in love with it. And that family, the daughter had a medical condition where they did own a house and they had to sell the house and the daughter was really sick,
Hmm.
whole bunch of things happened. And so like they were in tears on the phone with Joe as we gave them like the final like after they went through the screen the tenant and all of that. It was just so emotional because they were just like, we never thought we'd own a house again, and this property is perfect, and they were just so excited. So it's like when you again you get to that human level of like, yes, numbers, money, like it all matters, but like at the end of the day, like holy cow, like these people, I get goosebumps just talking about it because like they were just so emotional and moving in, and so that was the first time ever we lined up a buyer to like close on the rent to own, the first closing we call it. So they're ready to like rock and move in. And like we're still trying to close to buy the property. So that was kind of crazy. But then
Wow.
we've had other properties that take a little longer to find the right tenant as well. So
Hmm. Wow.
it's just, you never know. So I guess too, it's like if you're kind of thinking like, well, it just seems crazy. Who would let you take over their mortgage? People just want
Hmm.
convenience. And if you're trustworthy and you're honest and you do the right thing, like good things come to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you guys, when you're looking at these properties, are you just going solely off the numbers, or are you making sure they're in certain neighborhoods with good schools, or, like what other criteria are you looking for?
Yeah, you definitely want to take some things into consideration. If it's super, super rural, it might take you a little longer to find a rent-to-own buyer. So always keep that in mind. And, good schools are obviously amazing. Kind of like that starter home range is like one of our bread and butters of just like a family looking to get in and they're able to live there for a little while they just establish everything. And I mean, it works on small properties, it works on big properties. There really isn't like, as long as the numbers work and you can rent it as
Okay.
a long-term rental, that's
Mhm.
really like the key. I would say like the biggest, frustration right now is if it doesn't cash flow for a long-term rental, then it's usually not a deal for us.
Okay. That makes sense. And Christina asks, she has a question about seller financing. I heard one of the pitch people give the sellers is that they pay less in taxes when doing seller finance because they get smaller payments throughout the year versus, all up front. Is that true?
I mean, obviously, if they sell a house, they're going to owe all the taxes on that sale.
Okay, she said versus selling traditionally where they get a big chunk and then of money and that gets taxed. Do you send them a 1099 or how does that work?
I don't send them a 1099. I would just have them get with their accountant and however the CPA and them figure out how to properly do their taxes. So like I've got one property in New York. The guy had a sell and finance house. We did give him a little money down, and then he probably got taxed on it. I didn't really follow up with him because it's not my business. And then I send him $1,000 check every month through e-check or whatever. And then
Mhm.
when we sell that property, he'll probably, whatever
Mhm.
he owes. But
Okay. And I do feel like I've gotten that question before too, especially with people who are living in the houses and selling it. So, because you can, when you sell it, you're supposed to be able to have $250,000, unmarried worth of equity in the home that you're not getting taxed on. But you have to live in it within 2 years within a 5-year period. Have you heard of this before? Uh,
something sounds familiar like that, but
Okay.
I'm not like super well versed in it.
Okay. Because I feel like sometimes people will say, well, what if the contract's longer than that 5 years? Am I then getting taxed on it? But I think you and Joe had said it's not, because it's not like you're selling it in 5 years. It's like they're selling it to you now, but you're paying them that money within like a 10-year span.
Like a
So it
balloon
shouldn't
payment.
affect, yeah. So it shouldn't affect taxes, right? Because it's being sold now, not in 10 years. It's just taking 10 years to pay that out.
That's a
Okay.
CPA question. I don't want to say the wrong thing.
Yeah. Okay,
That's
this is
why,
good.
again, you got to have like some sharp attorneys, some CPAs, people that know real estate, and make sure that your sellers are also like doing all the things they need to do properly.
Yes, okay. And you said you put all of your properties in trust, like land trusts?
Yep, every property gets its own land trust. So instead of saying our LLC name on the deed, it'll say 123 Main Street, the address, whatever it is, land trust. And it's just a simple extra form that gets filled out at closing. You should not be charged more than a couple $100s. I've seen some attorneys trying to charge like thousands, which is crazy time. Like it should just be a super simple little piece of paper.
And you can do that whether it's you're buying it off seller financing or subject to?
So, and even if you already have properties that you've purchased, you can always transfer them into a land trust. I have a favorite attorney I'm working with out of Texas. His name is Bob Bloom, Asset Defense Company, and they're just incredible. I know a lot of folks in our personal community are using him, and he just makes it really simple. He breaks it
Mhm.
down because it is something to think about. I know nobody wants to because it sounds scary and what have you, but we live in an age where people want to sue people, and if it shows that Miranda owns like 10 properties, that gives people ammunition to want to maybe slip and fall or something
Mhm.
happens. So the more that you can just protect yourself, it's more for anonymity, just so if you pull up on PropStream, you can see how many properties one person owns if they
Mhm.
haven't created the proper structuring as their entities. And so we have multiple LLCs. And I mean, obviously, if you're in Florida, you need an LLC that's different than New York. But even in New York, I don't want to put, more than maybe like a handful of properties in one LLC.
Okay.
So just definitely take some time, do some research, but go to the professionals. Don't try to do it all on your own. Like that's what I feel like when people scrimp and save on like stuff like that, it comes back and bites you. So get with somebody that knows what they're doing. Bob Bloom is great. I know Prime Corporate Services, they offer some stuff too. We've done some stuff with them, but
Okay. And so do you need both an LLC and a land trust? Like why both rather than just like one or the other?
so your business needs an EIN, and
Okay.
that's all going to be set up through your LLC. And the land trust is just what owns the property. So if you're
Mhm.
trying to come after the land trust, it's only going to own the land like that house. So like I can't get, the other four or five
Mhm.
properties per se if I'm just trying to go after that one land trust because the land trust, what does it own? Just that one house.
Mhm.
So if I had my LLC as the owner of that house, you could also possibly see that I owned three or four others or 20 others in the LLC. So there's just some little things that make a big difference
Mhm.
that again, even if you only have a couple properties, it's just worth starting that research and then just starting to think about big picture.
Okay. We have another question. How can you depreciate a property and land? Is there? reevaluation options?
That's a great question.
That's a good
Um,
question.
like a cost segregation. I know that you could do those on your properties. We've definitely utilized some of that, but I mean,
It's just
I'm
like a
not the
regular
expert
rental,
on that.
right?
Yeah.
So you just do it over like 30 to 27 years like you normally would for a regular rental.
Or you can do the forced, is it forced appreciation?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Certain percent. Okay. Does the land trust transaction take place after the renting period ends?
So the land trust happens when I'm buying the property. So any property that I'm buying, it's going directly into a land trust. So that is who owns the property. And so technically my renters are renting a property owned from that land trust.
Okay. Does that affect like if you're doing a subject to, does that affect or put you at risk for the due on sale clause at all, or does that not affect it?
I mean, the due on sale clause could be called at any time.
Hmm.
If the banks find out the deed was transferred, it is a risk. Just depends on your risk tolerance. The rumor has it is that if it's an LLC that shows up, it's more of like oh, like that looks like a business, right? Bought this property and it might raise a red flag. However, a land trust is still a different deed on the name, and so that also could raise a flag. But it could be for estate planning purposes. It might not be as obvious
Hmm.
to the bank. Really, the two things the bank needs is payment made on time and insurance set up properly. And I see that being the two biggest problems that most investors who are not properly educated
Hmm.
have with the due on sale clause is that they did not set up the insurance properly, and meaning like maybe they didn't set it up and the seller canceled, and then now there's hazard insurance and red flags are, galore because obviously the bank needs to have insurance on that
Hmm.
property, or you miss a payment, or the payment changed and you weren't making the right payment. So two things to always keep an eye on are the payment being made on time for the right amount and then making sure insurance is on there.
Okay. And you still add that original seller. What is it? What do you have to do again? You have to add them as like an additionally insured or something?
Yeah, so the proper way to do it is make sure that whatever's on deed title is what's insured properly. And then the seller's added additionally named insured. And then I'll have like seller Deb, her last name, her current new address.
Okay. While buying a property, buyer pays wait, property, buyer pays a lot of expenses. How can we differentiate between balance and income statement items? Wait, let me reread that. I think I
I'm
read
not
it
sure.
wrong.
Maybe rephrase that a little bit for us
Yeah,
there.
rephrase it.
The buyer does pay a lot of expenses. How do we
Mhm.
differentiate between balance and income statements? I'm not sure if you're talking about like a profit loss or what. A balance sheet.
Balance sheet. Balance sheet for
Hmm.
who? The,
Like you mean when you're buying the property?
when you're analyzing it?
Maybe, yeah, maybe when you're analyzing, you want to see like how much am I going to be? I mean, because that is, if that's what you're talking about, how much money you have to come out of pocket to buy this property versus how much money will you make. You definitely want to kind of know those numbers because that's, again, I go back to these crazy deals I see floating on Facebook. They're like, it's only $40,000 down and then plus closing costs, plus.
Right?
Balance sheet and profile and loss items. I'm so sorry. I'm just a little confused. I don't know what that means.
I don't either. It's okay. Rephrase it again.
I wish you could have like you could like have somebody pop in and
More,
just ask.
more details.
A balance sheet and profile and loss items. I mean, ideally, you don't want to lose anything in my mind. Obviously, you'll be paying a little. You'll be paying your rent until you find your tenant buyer, and then once that tenant comes in, you should be up or at least like very close because you've got your large non-refundable, which will offset the cost of the closing costs that you had to pay. maybe putting in the new insurance policy, which could be expensive if you're in Florida like I am, and then you're covering utilities while you're waiting for your person to move
Yeah.
in, stuff like that.
Okay. Do you okay, I just had a brain fart. I was gonna ask you a question and then I forgot.
No worries.
Let's see. If it's important, it'll come back to me. No, one of the things I also want to ask you too, because I know you guys buy on wraps a lot. Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about why and can you do that for seller financing or Subto?
So I don't really know if you can do a wrap for seller financing. That'd be a Joe question. I don't know why you would. We just buy straight seller financing. So the big difference between subject to, which is like, very, very common and well known, and a wrap mortgage is that the wrap mortgage is going to protect your seller more for a couple of reasons. One, if I stop paying for some reason and I'm not making that seller's mortgage payment, if I bought it subject to, without the wrap mortgage in there, there's no way the seller can like just get the house back.
Mm.
If there's nothing in the paperwork protecting the seller. So he's just kind of like out of luck if I just stop paying. Versus a wraparound mortgage has this extra promissory note in there and is just stating in there saying that the seller will get back the house if I stop making payments, in the first after 30 days or whatnot.
Mm.
And then there's also the way that it's written that a seller is able to go and get a new mortgage. So if a seller, because it's happened to us where they purchased their house, we buy it on a wrap, and then they needed to go buy a new mortgage or get a new mortgage, I have to show proof that I'm making these payments, and the way that we bought it, well, they'll be able to show that new lender like, hey, like this is being covered. It doesn't affect my DTI. So there's just a couple of little things. And we only like we did this because that's how we learned it. But then also coming from New York, there was no attorney that I've ever met that would do sub two because it just is like it just leaves the seller hanging. And I'm seeing it more and more where people just default, and I don't know how they sleep at night, and I don't know like if they just don't have a conscience. But like I get stuff happens, but like if you can't pay the seller's mortgage, that's their credit
Mhm.
on the line. That's a lot to just stop paying. And so I
Mhm.
feel like I don't know if you saw in our group chat a couple weeks ago, one of our other community members, Steven, was like really upset because he's trying to help an other old lady who sold her house subject to. He even called the current buyer and he just like kind of swore at Steven and got all upset and like instead of like being able to just help the seller, like people. And I'm just like, I don't
Mhm.
understand. So that's why we're big advocates of doing it on a wrap mortgage, wraparound mortgage. It's just an extra piece of paper, but it's protecting the seller
Yeah.
and it helps them out. And it's just, I feel like it's the right thing to do.
Okay. So if you bought a property sub two and then you just stopped making the payments, it would hurt, yes, it would hurt their credit, but wouldn't they, how come they wouldn't be able to get the property back? Just,
They would have to go through foreclosure
oh, okay. Because you
and
have
really,
the, yeah.
yeah. And in places like New York, that could take forever. Texas might not be as long, but
Hmm.
if you just have, language in your agreement stating like, hey, like if this deal goes bad, like I just get the house back, like that's the worst thing that happened. Like at least now they have this, asset that they could get back.
Hmm. Okay. I guess for some reason I just thought that when you stop paying, they just automatically get the property back because the mortgage, I mean the loan company is technically still holding on to like the deed, right?
No, the deed transfers.
It completely transfers.
Yeah, I own the house unless you're buying contract for deed, and that's different. I've never done those, but
Okay.
yeah, I mean, you literally whether you're putting in a land trust, your LLC, your personal
Hmm.
name, like the deed transfers and the seller no longer owns that property. They're responsible for the mortgage. Their name is, their
Mhm.
credit, like they're tied to the mortgage, but the property, the asset is theirs, not theirs. But in a wrap, it all states that yes, they just get it right back.
Okay, that makes sense. And then you wouldn't really need, which is why you don't need to do that for seller financing. So I guess the only reason why you would do a wrap is if, I don't know if you've ever done this, but at that end of that rent to own term, rather than them going through a bank to buy the house, can you do a wrap with them and have them buy the house from you and just charge them interest?
I wouldn't want to again because a lot of my properties are in New York and I don't want to have to go through a foreclosure process of getting
Mm-hmm.
them out. So at that point, I just want to be out of the deal. If they're
Yeah.
ready to buy, like let them go to Bank of America or
Yeah.
whoever, and I get my back end check. The seller, if there is any equity that they have left over, they get theirs, and we all
Okay.
shake hands and have a nice
Okay.
day.
That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Great questions.
Well, I guess, is there anything that we have? If anybody has any questions, make sure to put them in the chat now. Otherwise, I feel like we covered so much. Is there anything you feel like we didn't really touch on that you want to highlight more?
I feel like, it's just if you're new to it or you're just trying to learn about it, just immerse yourself in it. Come and, binge on our
Mhm.
podcasts. We have those on Creative Finance Playbook. You can check that out on YouTube, Spotify. And then we offer a live training once a month. So we are actually doing that May 9th. So if you need the link to that, reach out, get that for you. We've got some special guests coming on that share their journey. We have Grace Gudenkoff coming on, and she is just a powerhouse
Yes,
lady
she is.
investor who, man, she's just really blown up the last few years. So it's fun to see where she first started. And
Mhm.
it just starts with one rental, right? So, like, you might see somebody that has a big portfolio and is saying all these crazy words. And you might feel like, oh my gosh, I feel so far away, but you're not. It's literally
Mhm.
one rental at a time, one step in the right direction, getting, if you're serious about it, investing in yourself, getting in the right rooms, and just doing the thing. As scary as it is sometimes, I mean, Miranda, like, might not want to send the message, but
Mhm.
if you didn't reach out, you wouldn't be, with your tiny home
Yeah.
now. And so it's just like every little moment will lead to a new one. And so I just feel like do the thing scared, messy, massive action, and, you can learn all the nitty gritty steps that we were chatting about through the last hour
Mhm.
while you're doing them, because that's
Yeah.
what I did. I didn't know all of this at once. It was
Mhm.
like, okay, I'm learning a new
Yeah.
lesson now. Here we go, and one foot in front of the other.
I know. And honestly, that's one of my favorite things about your guys' coaching program too, is that like, you guys really stress that just one step at a time. Once you get to that point, we'll cover it. Because I remember when I first started, I was like, had all these questions, and I'm like, wait, I'm like asking questions like for something that's like I'm 10 steps away from even doing. And you're like, let's just focus on this right now.
But that's
And
our
it's
brain.
hard.
Your brain's trying to protect us because
Yeah.
we are like almost in fight or flight mode, because the scary thing is to pick up the phone and call the seller
Yeah.
or send the Facebook message, or even bring the deal to class. Sometimes that can be nerve-wracking, but like those are the things that move the needle forward so that you can have your question answered when you're actually going through
Yeah, and
it.
the community is so important. Like, if you guys aren't part of their Facebook group, the Creative Finance Playbook, definitely go join. They do, guys. They do like 5 hour trainings in there. I'm like, every time I see that, I'm like, oh my gosh. And then like on our coaching calls, honestly, when I first joined the program, I was shocked at how long you guys stay on the phone, because normally in communities people are on the phone for like an hour, but you guys like this. We're 3 hours in, we're still going.
Girl, you got questions. I'm not leaving people hanging.
I know.
I do Tuesday. So I started yesterday at 1 p.m. Eastern, and it was about 2:15. I was getting a little quiet and I'm like getting ready to hop off, and then someone else hopped in and had questions. And then someone else hopped in and had questions. And I stayed on for 2 hours because that's the point. If you are in the middle of something and you've got questions, we've got the 24/7 WhatsApp channel, but then also the live support daily,
Mhm.
and the magic happens in between. So come to the calls once you have your questions, but like do the thing on the in between and then pop in when you can.
Yeah,
And that's what you do. And we're
absolutely.
so pumped for you. Can't wait. We're having you on our podcast soon here, and
Yes, I'm excited.
we'll get the full breakdown of Taco's new home.
Yeah, exactly.
Yay! Well,
That's so
thanks for having
funny.
me on, Miranda. It
Of
was such a pleasure.
course. And where can people find you again if they want to ask you more questions or get to know you a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, follow me on Instagram. I'm probably the most active on here. And then creativefinanceplaybook.com. You'll see all the links for our upcoming trainings. We live in Florida. We'll be in Orlando next week on Wednesday. So if you're in the Florida area, want to stop by, we're holding a meetup on the 30th. And we'll be having May 9th training. So I've got that for you guys. I mean, we give away our scripts. We give away how to find free leads. We want you to do deals. So come hang out with us.
Awesome. You're amazing, Jen. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for
Thank
sharing
you.
all of these amazing gold tips.
Awesome. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.